In those situations, guys, you've not got much power. I think you just have to keep quiet, do what they say, and hope that it'll be worth it in the long run. Getting a Thailand marriage visa, it's not as easy as you might think. Now, I'm just going to talk about my personal experience. I'm not an expert on the matter, but maybe it'll help one or two of you. First of all, let's talk about the agents. Now, I've never used an agent, so this whole story, this process that I'm about to explain is doing everything manually. The reason I've never used an agent, guys, is if it was a one-time process, one and you're done process, I probably would have just sucked it up and used an agent, let someone else sort it out for you and got it done. But it's not a one-time process. It's an annual, not cheap. The agents, I wouldn't say they're extremely expensive, but they're not cheap. Our logic has always been, we're going to need to know how to do this, what you need, what documents to get, what to expect. So the first couple of times we did the process, we made a lot of small mistakes, which I'll talk about. Obviously, we've learned from them now, and I'm actually about to renew my visa in 2 or 3 months. So hopefully, with a little bit of experience that we've gained, it should be quite straightforward. Just for a bit of personal context, guys, my wife and I met in Japan, if you've never viewed this channel before, and we didn't get married in Japan. When we decided to get married and spend the future together, we decided to move to Thailand, get married in Thailand, and then therefore do the visa process in Thailand itself. Now, from a very personal perspective, we actually arrived the day the borders shut in 2020. So that was a bit of a nightmare because everything was up in the air at that time. But obviously that is something that hopefully we'll never have to go through again. So I won't go into too much detail regarding that. And we did finally get the documents that we needed, because for a short time in 2020 they weren't assisting anybody in the Thai offices nor the UK embassy. You need some documents from both to process the marriage, prove you're not a bigamist, to prove that you're not already married elsewhere. And that was quite hard to get our hands on in 2020 because the embassy were only dealing with COVID related stuff. But eventually we got there, went through the marriage process. Just be aware, guys, you are going to need probably 6 weeks to 2 months between the day that you go to book your appointment to get married, it's very romantic, and the actual day that you go back to get married itself. So that was 2 separate trips for us. There might be other more efficient ways to do this, guys. We were sort of learning on the spot, definitely made a few mistakes, but in September 2020, we finally got there. We finally got married. We were legally married. It was time to start the next phase. Again, guys, I've lived in 3 different countries, and in the other 2 countries I lived in, my visa was connected to the work that I was doing, the job that I was doing. The company would sort that stuff out for you, and then you could kind of forget about it. Now, when I lived in Korea, I had to go to the visa office once a year, which is kind of similar to Thailand, but the company would sort everything out. They basically just give you a big pile of documents down to Mokdong Immigration Office. It'd usually be about a 2-hour process, and then it was done. You were done for another year. You'd get your alien card, as they call it. And in Japan, it's even better, a little bit more of a stressful day, and you do have to go back a couple of weeks later to collect things, but there's a day of submitting documents, a day when you go back. But my most recent Japan visa, I didn't actually use this entire time period, was 5 years. So for 5 years, you're good. You don't need to do check-ins, you don't need to renew, you can go in and out of the country as you please. It's great. So 5 years, you're basically a Japanese citizen, which was wonderful, but it's not quite so simple to get the marriage visa. So first of all, let's talk about the financial aspects. There's 2 processes, one that I know about, one that I don't know so much. One that I don't know so much is that you can prove your earnings. Now, I think you have to prove that you're earning over 40,000 baht a month. I think in order to do that, obviously it involves bank statements, but I think there's also an official document from the embassy that you have to get. But we didn't do that, so I can't really comment on that. You'll have to look at somebody else's video to get more information on that. What we did is the seasoning of the money. And in order to do that, the first thing you're going to need is a Thai bank account. Now, only certain banks will let you open a Thai bank account. The first time I came to Thailand, as I said, I wasn't actually married at the time, so I needed to find a bank that would just basically let me, on a tourist visa, open a bank account. Now, the bank that I ended up doing it with was Krungshi, the yellow one, and that was quite a helpful process because then you can just whack the 400,000 baht money that you need kind of as your proof of financial stability. You can whack that into the bank and just leave it to sit there until the process is finished. Now, I think the actual time required is 60 days, but as I'm about to tell you, don't be making plans for that money 61 days, 62 days later, because that 60 days might turn out to be a lot longer than you expect. Money's in the bank, you're letting it sit there, you're letting it season, as they call it. You need a lot of other documents. Now, my wife's a little angel. She sorted out a lot of the documents that she needed herself, and I can't offer much insight onto them. Of course, I went with her, but I didn't know what every single document was. I assume it's stuff like her house registration, obviously her personal ID documents, things like that. So you will need to go with your partner to get those at a local government office. And when you go to apply for the visa, there's going to be 2 separate days, and you need to do this all 15 working days before whatever visa you're on right now expires. So be very mindful of that. When I got my visa for the second time, I asked them, what day shall I come back? I was told by an officer to come back on a certain day, so of course I obliged. I came back on the day they said. Now, when we got there, it turns out that in that period there had been a couple of public holidays. We did as we were told, but unfortunately there was no leeway, and because of that I had to leave the country. I thought I was going back to actually finalize everything. I had to leave the country and restart the whole process from day one. So obviously, from the financial perspective, that money that had been seasoning for so long went back to 0 days. I'm not going to go too much into detail there. I'm not going to start playing a blame game. That was very frustrating for us. It's a bit of a kick in the teeth, to be honest, because technically we didn't do anything wrong. But what can you do in those situations, guys? You've not got much power. I think you just have to keep quiet, do what they say, and hope that it'll be worth it in the long run. When you submit the documents, there may be a home visit required. I guess they just want to check everything's legit, check there's nothing underhand going on. To us, it's never been a problem, but it's something that you should consider, that you're probably going to be required to be in your home with your wife, with your baby. They're going to come, they're probably going to compare the little photographs they make you take prior to your application. They make you take some photographs in the home that you are living in at the time, like everything looks legit. Something to keep in mind, that you may need to do one of these home visits. You get it, guys, then you get it, your 1 year stamp, 1,900 baht, just like any visa extension, and technically you're good for a year, right? Well, not quite, because you then have to do these 3-month check-ins. Obviously there is this option to do it online, but it's never worked for us. When we've questioned why it's not working, we've just been told it's probably easier to just come down to the office and do it in person. So again, even though that is just simply a check-in, that can turn into another half day every 2 to 3 months. Now, guys, if you've had a more positive experience with the online process and things like that, then that's cool. I know that there are different options for different offices, but that is something that's unavoidable. You have to do those check-ins. I think another final thing to consider is that if you want to travel out of the country, you do have to do a sort of sign out, sign in process where you have to go to a certain part of the immigration. There is a name for this, guys. I've forgotten it. I'm sure some of you will know. Drop it in the comments. If you basically have to pay to come back in, I believe it's 1,000 baht. It might even be 2,000 baht. But you basically have to pay to get a returnee stamp. Not a big deal. It's a little bit of inconvenience. I guess if you go to the airport early like we do, I'm one of those people who needs to be there 3-4 hours early just in case there's some wild traffic. I have missed a plane in the past. It kind of traumatized me. Something to do to fill the time. Make sure you don't forget that if you're going to be traveling out and in, because apparently if you get that wrong, that again will reset the whole process and you're back to square one. So it's not easy, but when you get to live somewhere like this, when you get to enjoy this beautiful country long term, it's worth it. So I don't want this to come across as a negative video, just a word of warning. You might come across a few hiccups during the process. Don't expect everything to be straightforward. Prepare for the worst, I would say. Prepare for a little bit of inconvenience, and then maybe you'll be pleasantly surprised. Having lived abroad for 15 years, I've kind of lost that tourist elitism where you think that because it's you that's on holiday, you're entitled to do what you want. Oh, I'm going to let my hair down, I'm on holiday. You still have to respect other countries, especially when you're living somewhere. I think it's super important to respect your host country. I guess if you are serious about your partner and you're planning on being here forever, it's just something you're going to have to accept and something you're going to have to get used to. Hope this one's been helpful. Guys, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.